Hey everybody, Big Toad here. Welcome to the studio. I did a full-length video on painting to the meadow, and what I want to do is I want to narrate that for you in a time lapse. It's like a 3-hour video almost. But my first step here is I block this in off of the drawings that I did and I showed in the how to plan my next oil painting to the meadow. And so I sketch it in with burnt sienna and thinner, so it's a real thin, quick drying sketching. And then I'm going to go in and start working on shadows, putting in shadows with really dark color. It's a pretty standard process that I use, nothing that I created. You'll learn this from plenty of artists that are also doing YouTube videos. But it's a process that I find works very well, and I recommend it. Sometimes I don't use it, but I find it's just better to go ahead and do it, especially if you're first starting out. So then I start blocking in. After I put in the darks, I start blocking in, putting in the lights, and trying to cover the canvas so that my colors are easier to mix when I can compare them to the canvas and keep my values lined up. That's, again, standard practice for a lot of painters. And so I've put in the trees there. You can see putting in the lights in the trees, and now I'm putting in the end. That yellow is the end point. That's where the meadow is, at the other end. So I'm going to start now putting in detail, and I'm using the very small brush stroke technique. I'm putting down a pretty sizable amount of paint. I find this method, I find it peaceful. I find it enjoyable. I think it helps me paint a better picture because of those things. There's other ways. I know there's a lot of artists on YouTube that will talk about, using as few strokes as possible, nice big strokes and all. And I agree with that approach. But some of the great masters use the smaller brush stroke techniques, and not that I'm a master at all, but it was good enough for them, and I like doing it. Then I should use that approach, that method. So Monet was one, and Sargent, they tended to use small brush strokes, and I work with both small and large. I don't just do small. I have a method to how I decide when and how I'm going to use different types of brush strokes. But anyway, now I'm working on the ground and using a lot of burnt sienna, and a lot of burnt sienna cooled down with titanium white. So I got different shades. I'm working with like 2 or 3, I think, different shades right now of the burnt sienna to give me the ability to move in and out of the shadows on this painting. The sun is coming in from the left side, and it's cutting up across and maybe towards the top of the right side, and so I'm thinking about that as I paint in these small brush strokes. And all of these brush strokes are designed to draw your eye up towards the top and the end of the painting there, where that yellow is. I'm going to change that yellow later in the session to blue for the sky. But that's what this whole painting is about, is drawing the eye up towards that blue end to that trail. And so my brush strokes are designed, and my colors are designed, and hopefully the values and the detail is all designed to draw your eye in that direction. So when I get to the bottom here, bottom left, I'll start using longer brush strokes, which kind of eases your eye up into the shorter brush strokes, which creates also shorter brush strokes will create that illusion of detail that I'm after. And the section with the shorter brush strokes also really helps the mind see detail in the larger brush strokes. So I use both. As I go towards my focal point, I typically try to shorten my brush strokes, make them more precise. And also those smaller brush strokes allow me to keep movement in my painting by having multiple colors, as well as creating that illusion of detail. You can see down here now I'm laying out longer brush strokes, a little bit longer than what I had on top, creating some lighter ground where the sun's hitting it a little better. Again, the sun's going to be on that little hill that I'm working on there to the left. Still using a lot of burnt sienna, and I've got it cooled down with the titanium white in various shades. I also brought in some yellow ochre on some of this to give these slightly different hues to the mixture. And for the really dark items, I have ultramarine blue and burnt sienna to get some really darks in there. Starting on the rocks now, the stones, which they're different kind of brush strokes and techniques there as well. I don't use small brush strokes like I did in the soil and the dirt, because I view the stones, the rocks, as obstacles along the pathway to the meadow. And how it would be in real life. They'd be obstacles to walk around, and so are they in the painting. They're obstacles around which for your eye to travel. So the brush strokes in there are larger and without direction other than to support the direction of the rock and its shape. So the brush strokes within the rocks follow contours and shapes of the rocks, while the brush strokes on the ground follow shape and contour of the ground with the intent of leading you towards the upper right orange or yellow spot. That's going to be the meadow, where the meadow would be. And you don't see the meadow in the painting, but you know it's up there. That's the whole point of the painting. You're going to walk up this trail to a meadow that's opened up there, and so you'll see the sunlight up there when I get done with the painting. So going in and putting grays in on the rocks, putting the light grays and dark grays and the mid grays. Typically, you can always assume that your rock's going to have three hues: a light, a dark, and a medium. I also come in with these rocks, and I put in a little bit of light green and a little bit of yellow, or a really muted yellow ochre, and those really have the effect of showing up like moss on the rocks, and it ends up being a cool effect. So that's what I was after, moss look on the rocks. So still working on the boulders and the stones, trying to get those shapes. Now, again, I use a lot of paint on each, even though these strokes are small in my brush right now. This is like an 8x10 board, so I'm not using a big brush, but I am putting down quite a bit of paint with that brush in comparison to its size. I mean, not globs of it, but a thick amount of paint when I put it down there. That's part of the style, and it's how I enjoy painting. I find that I find that you actually, the paint does more work for you when it's thicker. And here I'm working on shadow. I put the shadow in for the tree, and I was going to put some branches and things in it. And what I decided was that putting any more shadow than just what I had in that big tree the tree trunk that was going up there, it ended up being too busy. And so as I get moving along, I decided to take it out. Now the shadows on the rocks turn out really well, and I massage those. Sometimes when I'm painting, the first stroke is the only stroke, and other times like this, I'm feeling my way through it, experimenting with different looks and different values and shades and colors to try to get the feeling I'm after. So I do change, and one of the things about oil painting is you can create mud. Well, how you create mud is a dry brush that you're trying to fix something. By using more paint, you actually are less likely to create mud unless you just keep pushing it in, pushing it in, pushing it in, pushing. You can get the hang of it to where you can use a lot of paint and not create a mud look. And if you do create mud, you scrape it off and you just start painting back over it again. And because you're using a thicker amount of paint, it covers that part of the canvas better that you scraped off. So I think our enemy is not enough paint. And not enough paint, I think, slows us down, impacts us. I think the amount of paint shows confidence without being wasteful. It shows our brush strokes there are important. I think they show confidence as well. And so that's part of the reason I like this method. I like to think ahead to my brush strokes and where they're going to be. I just find this very rewarding to paint with that mindset. Now I'm going in and working on the trees some. As you see, that first tree down on the left, it's got some nice look to it. I've got that bigger tree. Then I've got a couple smaller trees, 3 smaller trees to the next big tree, then a couple smaller trees to the last big tree. And I'm painting the darks all around these trees now so I don't lose them. And working a little bit on the ground, bringing that shadow down. I try to use my colors everywhere. So if I use a color in one place, I try to find a place to use it elsewhere in my paintings. I don't like to just use a color once and then never use it again. I want to create harmony, and part of that harmony is carrying colors over, even if it's small. Your eye will catch it and you'll remember, oh, I just saw that color over there. I'm adding some texture to these trees now. So working on shadows, working on kind of the bark, creating the illusion of detail, using various brush strokes going up and down the trunks. Now I'm painting in some highlights and stuff in the shadows between to try to create, again, the illusion of more forest back there. And if I don't like it, I just cover it back up with dark and keep going, like I'm doing there. I'm pushing that little tree back further. I don't want them all lined up on the edge, so that's why I pushed that one back in further. There's a tree right there on the edge too. I gotta keep remembering to put some color to. As you see, my trees are starting to take shape. I'm taking my time. I'm doing experimenting as I go. I see these painters do their first attempt at every color seems to be right, and their first method that they use seems to be exactly what they wanted. It's maybe they're painting things they're really familiar with. I don't know, but it's impressive the way some of these YouTubers paint. It's like every stroke is their last stroke, and but I experiment. I'll be honest. I experiment looking for various looks, and I think the problem with experimenting is, again, you can create mud if you're not careful. But you'll see I do a lot of changing and I don't create mud. Part of that is how to use your paint and how to use your brush. And again, I think our biggest enemy when it comes to mud, and the best way to prevent it, is use more paint. Put the paint down. You're not painting a wall where you don't want any left over. You're an artist. You're an oil painter. Let some of that oil paint stand up. Let that every brush stroke, whether small or big, hold some texture to it. I'm not the kind of painter that likes to smooth everything over and blend it so much that you can't hardly see a brush stroke anymore. I enjoy the texture of the brush strokes. Here I'm putting in green for the grass. Some moss along the edge of the trail. I'm not trying to overdo it at all. I've got a couple sections on each side that I'm going to do. And I go in there, put some darks in around that moss, and I think I come back in and lighten that up a little bit. But I take some more darks out into that sunny area. And there I see I'm putting a little bit more green here in places. You can't hardly tell it's green in some places because it's so dark, but that's okay. When the light catches it just right as a viewer, you'll see the color in the green. I do put some green, again, like I said earlier, on these stones. Not all of them. If it did all of them, that would look silly. But I do put green on some of these stones. It really turns out to look like moss. And when I showed the painting to my daughter, first thing she says, "Oh, the rocks, the stones have nice moss on them." Okay, accomplished. Now I'm putting in various shades of green into that forest area. Again, not trying to paint a tree, not trying to paint leaves, but I was trying to just create the illusion that there was greenery back there. I put some light. Now that light yellow that I'm using, it kind of represents the fallen pine needles from pine trees and stuff. So I don't want to overdo it. So I put it in a couple places on the trail. And now you see me kind of touching up, putting some more darks in the trees. I decided my trees need to be darker. They were too close to the same color as the rocks. And I wanted to push those trees back. So to push them back, I darkened them in this case. Because my foreground in my visual area is the warm, brighter colors in that trail. So I needed to push these trees further back into that forest, so I darkened them, because this is a very small landscape. Now I go ahead and put in grass, and I don't want, again, you don't want to overdo something like the grass. I've got a light mixture of I believe it's the yellow ochre with some titanium white. Going in there, putting spurts of this grass, and I'm going to go in with a darker color as well on top of this, so I get more. So it's not flat. I'm not a one-dimensional. So I think I'm I'm putting one over there by that tree, and yeah. So you got to be sparing where you put it. Now I'm putting in that darker color, more of an orangish brownish color, to give the grass depth and to not make it look I made this one here a little darker because it's in the shadow of that stone. Did put some highlights on it though. Really got into this grass, started spreading it out a little bit, making it a little larger, but so it was more noticeable. But again, don't overdo that. All right, now I'm getting to the finishing touches here. I'm putting in the blue sky, and I decided to just go with the blue sky at the end of this trail. Yeah, the opening back there, maybe if I'd have done this on a much larger canvas or board, I might have put something at the end of this, but there's really not a lot of room. So I just left it to the imagination of the viewer. I put a nice blue sky back there. And I did go a little darker on the blue sky than some people might, but I did that because I believe, having walked down, and I'm putting sky holes in right now so you can see the sky through. Not a lot, never want to overdo those. But again, because we're coming out of this trail that's much of it's in shadow, that blue sky is gonna stand out bluer. So I'm pretty much just wrapping up here on this painting. I hope you've enjoyed this. And this is the Big Toad, and I am out.